Ladies and gentlemen, as part of the Jeremiah Show, welcome to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. Now here's the host of the show, a man whose life was defined when he was a child and saw Match Game host Gene Rayburn politely stumble out of a restaurant. It's TV's Tim Stack.
Yay! Gene Rayburn.
Wow, yeah.
How about that name I'm throwing out? Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. I'll quickly tell the Gene Rayburn story because it was a story that I suddenly realized that I wanted to be famous. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a comedian. Like I wanted attention. And it was the moment in my young childhood, and it was because of Gene Rayburn. So I was sitting, I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And there was a Bucks County Playhouse, and a lot of people would come in there to do plays. So I don't know what play. Gene Rayburn, I think, did a bunch of plays there. This is before Match Game. I'm like 10 years old, maybe even 8 years old. And all of a sudden I hear this commotion and I look up and there's Gene Rayburn. I don't know who he is, but my parents and other people in the restaurant are just agog that Gene Rayburn has stood up. But I also notice he's sort of politely stumbling out of the restaurant. So I don't know if he's hammered. I don't know if he's sort of doing a dance like he's trying to cover up his stumble. I don't know if he's putting on a show. I just know that the entire restaurant is going crazy because Gene Rayburn is there. And I thought to myself at a young age, like, I want a restaurant to go crazy. Now, that's never happened to me.
I thought you just wanted to be a polite drunk.
That I accomplished. Anyway, it's just one of those stories like when you're a kid, like something seems so unbelievably important. And it was Gene Rayburn, who I went on to watch every day during college, host Match Game. And I loved that show. And I got to meet Charles Nelson Riley later when I've told that story on this show. Or if I haven't, I will. Probably 3 or 4 times because I'm running out of material. I'm running out of stories. Well, we got a guest today with some great stories. And he's got a book out, which we're going to talk about. So why don't we do a little cue to set up the tone of who we're dealing with here today. We got a drum roll going. Here's the introduction. He is the producer of films you've never heard of. Films like FORREST GUMP, obviously I'm being sarcastic here, Flight, Contact, Allied, Castaway, starring me and Tom Hanks. Yeah, I think Tom was in the movie.
Did you play the volleyball?
And he worked on such little-known movies. Again, I'm being sarcastic. Back to the Future, Rodger Rabbit, a little tiny movie we just heard the music from, Star Wars 5, The Empire Strikes Back. He was the executive producer of the most successful, everything is sarcastic today,
so far ahead of
TV
its time.
show, Johnny Bago. It was ahead of its time. We can talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to, most of today is going to be talking about his book that he wrote called Breaking and Entering, The Education of a Film Producer. Anyway, please welcome old friend and very successful film producer, Mr. Steve Starkey.
Yay.
Steve. Three of us are all applauding here today.
Yeah, right. That's the most applause I've ever got.
Three.
That's wonderful. You know, I feel good now.
I was thinking about when you and I met, which has been a long time now. But then after reading your book, I'm realizing we met earlier. Because I was thinking it was back in Johnny Bago days.
No, we have a mutual friend.
Go ahead, you take this.
Peter Seaman, but go.
Peter Seaman, yes. I met those guys from Tales from the Crypt. I think I met you on Amazing Stories.
Yeah, you probably did.
Because I was an actor in the Burt Reynolds.
Yes, and I was actually associate producer on that episode.
Yes. And reading your book, you had to deal a lot with Burt Reynolds,
yes.
Which I think a lot of people in Hollywood can claim they had to deal a lot because he was not.
So were you a friend of Burt's or Dom DeLuise?
I was a friend of Dom DeLuise.
Is that true?
Yeah, oh yeah. He was a really, really close friend. But Joanna Ray was the casting director. What's
yeah,
her
Ray is her
name?
last name, but I don't know about Joe. Yes.
Karen Ray.
Karen Ray.
And I got cast in it.
Yeah.
And then when I showed up, I let Dom know I was going to be there. He was thrilled. But then he let me hang out with Bert and Dom in their and Lonnie in their sort of separate dressing room.
world. Yes.
So so I think that's maybe where we first met. And I was thinking it was 1986.
So was Bert wearing those tight jeans and that sort of button shirt with the gold? And when you
Well,
when he
that's
was
what Bert
the
wore
episode.
every day.
Yeah, right.
I will say this about, and I've said this, like the three best directors I ever worked with, Bob Zemeckis,
Yeah.
Blake Edwards,
Okay.
and Burt Reynolds. I thought he was I don't know
He's
what
great.
you thought.
No, he's great. And he makes everybody comfortable on the set.
And what they all had, they all did the same thing, which
Yeah.
was when they give you a note, all they would do is volume control. They would,
Right.
I'm doing this for the camera there. They would do this. They would go like, dial it up a little bit. And then I'm talking
Or
like
back
Bob.
off a little.
Yeah, go back down a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's how they directed.
It's not like give it to me happier.
Yes, it was none of that. Or do it with an accent, nothing
Yeah,
like
right.
that. It was just volume control
Right.
on performance.
Right.
And I thought that's anyway.
Usually
I think,
it triggers the emotion much better
yes.
for an actor.
It's just great. They better have it by the
Yeah.
time they show up they better have the character down by the time they show up to film.
Yeah, right.
So at that point, it's just volume control. But anyway, Steve, you have had an incredible career, which you talk about in your book. If you look at Steve, you think you're a guy who went to a lot of Grateful Dead concerts.
I did.
You did,
Yes.
which is sort of how you got into not Grateful Dead, but you sort of fell into this incredible career.
Yeah.
So talk about, and I know you talk about that in the book, but tell us about that.
You mean about how I first broke in or just?
Well, you
how it
started out
just
as an
rolled-
electrician, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I came down to LA. I didn't know anyone. And so I did what anybody would do. I went to Larry Evans' bookstore and I
Yes.
got like production A to Z.
Did you want to work in showbiz? You wanted to
I
work in
wanted to
film?
get, well, I was in construction work. So I kind of wanted to learn a trade,
Right.
but I wanted to learn a trade in film. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go get hired and see, how you get started to become a cameraman or
Right.
sound man or anybody.
You didn't know.
I didn't know anything. I didn't know how movies were made.
Right.
So I was just
And
whatever.
what year is this?
75.
75. Okay.
Yeah. So I go down, I finished school at Berkeley, where of course you learn a lot about film. I'm joking, they didn't have a film department. So I go down to LA and I start pounding the street and nothing happened. And so I'm sitting in this HR office at Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And, you're with a couple other knuckleheads filling out, your application. It's not going to go anywhere. Someone's going to, toss it in a bin.
Right.
And I heard this guy say, yesterday I broke on the lot at Warner Brothers and started walking around. I said, and I went, wow, he did. So that afternoon,
Yes.
I go to the back lot of Universal and I see this bus going around the parking lot. Now it's got a bunch of other sets and backlot stuff, but then it was a big parking lot. I saw the guys congregate at the end of the line of cars. Bus would come by, pick them up, into the studio they went.
Yeah.
I was in with the
You
group.
went for the next group.
I was with the next
So
group.
now you're on the lot.
Now I'm on the lot and
Had you ever been on a lot before? A movie
No.
lot?
no.
That's so funny.
So I get off and I just start wandering around,
Right.
and see big stages, that you imagine or seen from the street, you
Yeah,
know,
sure.
and I walk into a stage and they're shooting some TV show or something.
Right.
And I walk up to each of
Rockford
the,
Files or something.
Probably. I
Oh,
did
in the
work
book,
on-
you talk about
worked
Robert
on
Conrad.
I worked on Rockford Files
That's great.
and I did work with Robert Conrad.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode.
Yeah,
can
but
do a-
anyway, so I go and talking to the guys and each of them said, look, you should just go to the department here on the lot. Sometimes they hire newbies just to do like whatever the starting apprenticeship work is. The first place I got a reaction was in the electrical department. There was this tall Texan and I went up and he got, no, we don't got nothing today, but try us again tomorrow. So I said,
It's
okay,
almost like on the waterfront, like you're looking for
I'm looking
jobs.
for a job.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all unionized,
Right.
like on the waterfront. And so I'm leaving and I look up and it says his name was Shackelford. I said, wow, I used to sneak into those basketball games at UCLA. And
Lynn
there was
Shackelford?
Lynn Shackelford.
Yeah.
I went, you don't know Lynn Shackelford. Wow, that's my son. Your son is Lynn Shackelford, the left-handed shot from the side of the UCLA Brew. He said, yeah. And I said, I'll be darned, I loved him. And he said, now you listen, son, you come back here tomorrow and let's see if maybe we got something for you.
Oh my God. That's what it took.
I went back a number of days in a row and finally he put me on a show, Baba Black Sheep with Robert
That's
Conrad.
any book you talk about that. So
That was
Bob
my first-
Conrad is your introduction to Hollywood.
To movies.
Oh man. That's I wrote a TV movie for him, so I know Bob Conrad.
In my acknowledgments, I acknowledged Ray Shackelford for giving me my first job because I figured if he hadn't given me that job, maybe I would have been painting houses.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Right. But everybody sort of has that story. The thing that I think that the successful people seem to always have is they made it happen for themselves. It's almost like writing, like you got to make the character create the conflict themselves, whatever it is.
Right.
Jeremiah's here. He's taking pictures.
Oh, good.
I'm not sure what this is for, but he's here.
I don't know. Is it some magazine you have in the
Could
side
be.
or
We don't know.
something?
I always worry about Jeremiah. I should give a little shout out. Jeremiah Higgins is the producer, Dr. D, the engineer, Richard Dugan. I always forget to mention them.
You should certainly mention him now that he's taking a picture.
Yeah, really. So let's jump ahead. And for those people who don't know, like through all these machinations, you become a really big producer of really big movies, big, expensive, epic movies. But just quickly explain like what a producer does, because it's different in TV. Usually producers are writers.
Yes.
But you're the guy. Well, you tell them.
Well, basically it's like you're the head of a construction project, construction site.
Right.
So you're in charge of hiring, the electrician, the framer, the painter, the plumber. You're hiring all these people. And in a sense, the architectural drawings, which is done by a scriptwriter in movies, is your guide. So that's what you're using sort of as a template for, so you're managing the crew. You're involved if you're in the role that I was in, you're involved from the very beginning, which is when they're developing the screenplay, hiring the cast, selecting the cast,
right,
choosing all the technicians that are going to lead all the various departments, and then managing them throughout the shoot. And then I always took it to the end where you're involved in the editing, post-production, sound, music,
right,
the whole thing.
And that is not most producers hand it off to a post-production. Certainly in television, they do.
It's often divided up where there'll be producers who develop material, find material, hire a producer or possibly a lead actor, and then they take off and hire another producer to make the movie.
But your skills, I think, are beyond most producers because of your expertise in post.
Yes.
With editing. And because, which we're going to get to in the next segment, is you find yourself up at Lucas Ranch working on The Empire Strikes Back as an associate editor.
Right.
Okay. Which I want to get to in the break. We're coming up on a break, right, Dr. D? Okay. Why not take one now? I'm talking to Steve Starkey, his book. I'm going to show it on camera right there. Breaking and Entering, The Education of a Film Producer. One of the things I love about this book is it's really about your journey. It's not about it's not a book. If you want to read a book about a producer's journey, read this book. If you want to read like what Meryl Streep said, it's not that book. It's not those kinds of stories. It's really about a guy's journey. And I always love journeys. That's how I tell so many stories on here about, being a waiter and then getting jobs. And it's always the journey to me that is
much more interesting.
It's so much more interesting
once you get there.
Yes. Well, that's fun too, but the journey, you're absolutely right.
It's more fun.
Okay, we're going to take our first break. You're listening to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack.
Okay, go ahead.